Hi, everybody. Welcome to Dave C. Straight from the Pit. I thought for today's show, we could talk about the mid-'80s Cobra Air Force. Last episode, I talked about how Cobra first formed the Air Force in the early '80s. So on the deck of the flag here, we've got some mid-'80s Cobra Air Force classics. We've got the 1984 Cobra Rattler. We've got the 1985 Flight Pod, aka Trouble Bubble, and the 1986 Cobra Night Raven. On the 1985 Sunbow animated series, the G.I.Joe cartoon featured Cobra Televipers, which are these guys here. And they were often in the Cobra flight pods. I think due to the fact that they were communications experts and they were always doing reconnaissance missions in these little trouble bubbles and relaying information back to Cobra Command. And Mixmaster Shane, he really likes these Televipers because on the cartoon, they'd always have a message that would go across the top of their goggles. But yeah, this was a really neat idea for Hasbro back then, I think. And I remember my cousin Matt, he had it back in 1985. And I didn't have one because, like I've stated before, back in '85, I was lucky enough to get the USS Flag, and my parents didn't spend that much more money on me for a few months after that, for just cause, of course. And yeah, so one day I went over to my cousin Matt's house, and he had the Cobra Snow Serpent, 1985, and this thing. And I was like, what the heck? That thing's awesome. And I really wanted it, of course, just like I wanted everything G.I. Joe from the 1980s. But I never actually got one until I was an adult collector years later. I picked this one up at a nerd convention a few years ago. Quite a neat little toy. So here's the front of the box, and it says G.I. Joe in the 1985 block lettering. It says Cobra Flight Pod. An enemy weapon with movable machine gun. Does not shoot. It's a Canadian box, as per the French on the front, as well as the English. It says, fits most enemy and G.I. Joe figures. Figures sold separately, so it didn't come with a Televiper. See back panel for actual size and contents. And it still has the price tag on it. And I really like that because the Bay was, well, still is a huge store in Canada, the Hudson's Bay Company. And believe it or not, it actually owned more than half of Canada for several years before Canada became a country. So it's kind of an interesting thing if you guys want to go back and look at history. But yeah, the Hudson's Bay Company actually controlled a lot of Canada and owned most of the land. And they were responsible for a lot of early Canadian things. So I think it's pretty cool that the Bay is still around as a store. And I remember going to the Bay so often in the 1980s with my Nana and my Aunt Carol, my mom, sometimes with my brother. He would get like different tapes and stuff. And yeah, it was just a really cool store. And it's still there now. And yeah, so back then it was $4.99, this flight pod, as you can see there. And it has the Cobra Enemy logo on it, the 1985 one. Flip the box around now, And there's quite a bit going on, just like most of the 1980s G.I. Joe boxes. And it says Cobra Flight Pod, G.I. Joe. Cobra's ultra high-tech, jet-propelled, one-man flying vehicle. Insert one of the Cobra enemies into your jet-propelled flight pod for a secret spy mission, or pre-program it for several flight drone reconnaissance. Watch out, G.I. Joe. This futuristic pod is based on Cobra Command's top secret designs, including the most sophisticated technology in the Cobra weapons arsenal. So yeah, like I was saying earlier, it was used for reconnaissance and as a drone, which is kind of like the Cobra Claw from 1984 that came out a year earlier that I had on the last review. I did a early 80s Cobra Airforce review, and this is mid 80s, and they were back at it again with drones before they were drones. So that's pretty cool by the Hasbro design team from the 1980s. Jet-propelled flight pod. See-through canopy. Rudders move. Removable missiles. Machine gun. Actual size shown. Aerial mine with removable hatch. Figure can grasp steering bars. Super realistic detail. And the flag points are removed. So a kid probably mailed away and got his Cobra Commander or his Major Blood or what have you, which is always a nice thing to see that they were put to good use. And here's a look at the actual flight pod. And you can see that the canopy closes down. And everyone remembers on the cartoon that it had this great big Cobra logo on it. And there it is there. So they didn't skimp out when they made a toy. They actually went ahead and put that on there. And I think it looks just magnificent, really. And there's one of the missiles there on the side. There's a jet engine on the back. Machine gun on the front. The handlebars. And there's that little aerial mine, which as a kid, I never really knew what it was. And I remember seeing it at my cousin's house, and I was like, what is that little thing there? And yeah, I don't think he knew either. But all these years later, now I know what it is. And I think that's just really, really cool. Now we can have a look at the 1984 Cobra Rattler, which I said last show that this was a game changer for Cobra because they came along with just a really, really kick-ass jet to battle the Joe team and maybe something that could kind of rival the G.I. Joe Sky Striker. And I was lucky enough to get a box, a 1984 original box of this a few years back. We got the G.I. Joe block lettering, 1984, on the top. It says a Cobra Command weapon. And this says this because obviously it's not a G.I. Joe vehicle, so it's not going to say a real American hero. And back then, what they did was if it was a Cobra vehicle, they would put a Cobra Command weapon. So that's why that's on there like that. It says Cobra Rattler, ground attack jet. It's a Canadian box. So this was just like the one I got back in 1984. It's got the Cobra enemy logo. And one thing I remember as a kid, I remember looking in this canopy here, where the machine guns are, and I was like, that Cobra soldier has a red mask. And I picked that out because I had a couple Cobra soldiers and officers, and of course they all had the black mask. So I was kind of always noticing things about G.I. Joe and the detail back then. And it's kind of funny that I remember that, but that's one of the things I remember about this. Of course, it's a classic Hector Greedo art from 1980s. It's got the pilot Wild Weasel in the front. It's got that really cool Cobra Airforce logo. And this was the first time that appeared on a toy. It's got the Cobra with the wings on it. And I always thought that was just really, really clever by Ron Rudat to come up with that. And there it is down there on the wing as well. And that's where Wild Weasel would be in the box. It says includes Cobra Rattler pilot, Wild Weasel, with swivel arm battle grip. Ages 5 and up. Assembly required, no tools necessary. See back panel for actual size. So here is the back of the box. And looking at this now, it just brings back so many memories. I remember I had this in 1984, and it was my 9th birthday, and my parents got me this. And I'll never forget it because my cousin Shelly was over. She was probably my favorite cousin out of that side of the family. And we were really good friends for a long time. And still are today. But yeah, she was there, and she was the only girl there. And everybody else there were all my neighborhood friends. And it was made up of a lot of young kids who had all G.I. Joe stuff. And we would always meet up and play in the neighborhood. I had a tree fort in the backyard. And we would fly the glider off there before it broke, of course, like I talked about last episode. But yeah, we would meet there, and we'd have big giant G.I. Joe battles in the backyard. And my cousin Jonathan, he had the Sky Striker. So he really, really wanted me to get this. So we could have battles against each other. So it says Cobra Rattler, VTOL, with 14 removable rockets and bombs. Ground attack jet. It's got the 1984 G.I. Joe block lettering. This aircraft was modeled after the 1957 British Airforce Harrier. And later on, there were other versions of the vertical takeoff and landing technology. But that was the first. And you can see here, it has engine covers that can be removed. It says remove cover to reveal engine detail. 2 removable battle damage fuselage panels. And I remember this when I was a kid, and I thought that was totally cool because you could pretend that it got all shot up. And you could pop these on instead of the regular ones. Those ones there pop off. And you could put the ones that are all shot up on there instead. And I did do that a few times. And there's one for the front as well. The Cobra Rattler is based on Cobra Command's top secret designs. It's one of the most advanced weapons in Cobra's arsenal. Use it to help the evil Cobra Command battle G.I. Joe. Cobra Commander Destro designed the ferocious Rattler, a vertical takeoff and landing ground attack jet. So it's stated there, the type of technology it is. This is one of Joseph's favorite jets, one of my friends. And he was actually a helicopter pilot, so he knows a little bit. He knows a little bit about the Air Force. So super realistic detail. Jet engines and wings rotate 90 degrees for simulated vertical takeoff and landing. And there's the photo there of the jet engines. Removable combat rockets and bombs. Wheels roll. Landing gear retracts. Carry cannon rotates. So that's like a big minigun on the front there. Actual size shown. Sturdy construction for rugged play. And if you look here, this is kind of interesting. This is still some birthday wrapper left on there from when it was wrapped for somebody's birthday. And it's not mine, of course, because I picked this up in Toronto a couple of years ago. Unless somehow this box ended up there, but that's just really cool that it actually has a piece of Scotch tape with some birthday wrap on it. Oh, oh no, I just knocked it off. Oh well, that's okay. I can always tape it back on there for old time's sake. Yeah, it says detailed battle prints inside fully explain how a real Rattler would operate. Add them to your Cobra command file. And this vehicle came with 4 flag points. It says save for special G.I.Joe premiums. So that's a pretty good amount. And there's a list of all the stuff that it came with. I'm not going to ramble through all that, but there's a lot of stuff. And just like my brother Jason C said the other day, he really liked the blueprints and all the schematics and drawings and a decal sheet and sticker sheet and everything that made it just more realistic. And I liked it just as much as him for that, because as much as this stuff is sci-fi, I also think that it's really cool and necessary that it was somewhat based on real technologies. And there's Wild Weasel on the back of the box. Cobra Rattler pilot. Codename Wild Weasel. File name classified. Primary military specialty ground support pilot. Birthplace classified. Wild Bill says, he may be a back-shooting, low-down snake in the grass, but boy, can he fly like nobody's business. You gotta respect the skunk for that. Hey, what did Voltaire say? To give our enemies their virtues, that is a greater miracle. The Rattler first appeared in, I think, about 10 issues before this issue. This one's number 34. But I particularly like this one because of the way it depicts the Rattler and Wild Weasel, the pilot. And this one was from April 1985, as you can see down there. And yeah, it's just an epic battle between the Sky Striker and the Cobra Rattler. And Baroness is the co-pilot with Wild Weasel. And the co-pilot for the Sky Striker and Ace is Lady J. And there she is there. But yeah, I really like the end of this issue because it has this famous panel where Ace and Wild Weasel salute each other after a hard-fought battle where they both almost blew the crap out of each other out of the sky. But there's a bit of respect there. Kind of like what Wild Bill just said on his file card about Wild Weasel. That there's a bit of respect there between enemy pilots. In 1986, this massive Cobra jet came out, and it was called the Cobra Night Raven. And it's just so aesthetically pleasing. So many Joe fans really appreciate this jet. And it came with a pilot Strato Viper. And of course, these guys were kind of a special kind of pilots. They were surgically altered to be able to sustain all kinds of crazy altitude. And also in 1986, the Firebat came out. And it was a jet for the Cobra Terradrome. It would go inside that dome there, and it would open up, as you can see there, and it would fly out of there. So yeah, it was a smallish kind of jet, and it came with the AVAC pilot with the parachutes, and there's a couple of them there. Yeah, I don't want to make this video too long. We're already coming up on 20 minutes, and I've kind of rambled on quite a bit about this Cobra mid-80s Airforce, because there's a lot of other stuff, of course, and there's also a lot of late 80s stuff. And yeah, I don't want to go overboard and bore you guys too much with all this. But yeah, this Night Raven was in this episode here, this Marvel G.I.Joe Special Missions number 5. And I remember this as being just a great comic. The Cobra Night Raven is first introduced, as are the pilots, the Strato Vipers. And I remember them being kind of arrogant to the rest of the Cobra Air Force personnel. And because of this, at the very end, I really like how Larry ended this issue. He has it where they get even with a jerk pilot. He was a big hotshot guy and bragged about everything. And it turns out in the end that these other Cobra pilots, they got even with him. So I kind of liked the end of this issue. And then, of course, there's the Star Stiletto, the Cobra jet that came out to kind of battle the Defiant in outer space. And then there was the Cobra Condor, as shown here on the cover of Special Missions number 28. And this actual comic is called Condor. And there is the Defiant. But yeah, I don't have the Condor, but I'm looking to get one because it's kind of a cool jet. And yeah, but this was more about the mid-80s for G.I. Joe, Cobra Air Force, and I think I covered it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next time. Okay, guys, take care. Face to face in secret places, feel the chill. Say